Hey guys, today we are comparing the Sony A6400 here with the Sony ZV1 right here to find out which is going to be the best vlogging or YouTube camera for you. We'll compare everything from image quality and stabilization through to slow motion and minimum focus distance. So we will answer the important question of how close can I put my face before the horror forces them to lose focus. Ready? And let's go. So, what are we going to cover? Basic info and features of each camera will be first. We've got a full list of everything we'll cover with timestamps here, plus chapter links in the description. Just before we start, if you enjoy the video, then like, subscribe, and I would love to hear your questions or thoughts in the comments. But like a sumo wrestler looking for a towel, we have got a lot to cover. So let's begin with the basics. The ZV1 is priced at £700 versus £999 for the A6400 with the kit lens. The ZV1 has a 1-inch 20.1 megapixel sensor versus a larger APS-C sensor with 24.2 megapixels in the A6400. The ZV1 has an f1.8 to 2.8 lens with a 24 to 70mm full frame equivalent field of view. The A6400 kit lens is a 16 to 50mm f3.5 to 5.6, which gives a full frame equivalent field of view of 24 to 75mm. Both record 4K at 24 or 30 frames per second and 1080p at 24, 30, 60 or 120 frames per second. All the footage you're going to see is 4K 24 frames per second except for slow motion, so that you can see the highest possible video quality from each camera. We are also using the same HLG3 picture profile for each camera and letting them both use auto white balance. Now that's out of the way, let's talk about my therapist's favorite topic, keeping things stable. The A6400 has optical steady shot built into the kit lens. It's got no in-body stabilization, so you need to rely on stabilization from the lenses. This works okay for simple movements like panning, but walking is more of a mess than the bathroom in a diarrhea emergency center. The ZV1 has digital stabilization with standard steady shot, which is like optical steady shot. It's okay for simple stuff, but not great for walking. And active steady shot, which is much better but crops in significantly. We'll talk about solutions to that later. The ZV1 also records gyroscopic data, which lets you control stabilization in post-production with the free Catalyst Browse software. This can be great, but it is an extra step in your workflow. I normally vlog with a grip extension like my friend here, the GorillaPod, and here you can see that combined with the various different types of stabilization side by side. We have the A6400 at the top, ZV1 with standard steady shot on the left, and the same ZV1 footage stabilized in Catalyst on the right. We're now going to push the extremes with a running test. Then we've got the A6400 optical steady shot versus the ZV1 active steady shot for walking, and now also with a more extreme running test. For me, the ZV1 is the easy winner for both stabilization options and quality, but we've got more examples in the next section if you're undecided, plus a wider comparison of all the Sony stabilization options in the description. Next is field of view. This should be really similar since the ZV1 has a 24 to 70mm full frame equivalent lens compared to 24 to 75mm equivalent on the A6400. Compared directly, the A6400 gives a slightly wider field of view, as you can see in this landscape. In vlogging, the extra width isn't super noticeable. The real issue here is the trade-off of stabilization and field of view that you get with the ZV1. If you use Catalyst stabilization, there is some cropping which you can control. If you use active steady shot, there is a big fixed crop. Either way, you're getting a tighter field of view. At the opposite end of things, zoom reach is very similar on both cameras, but the A6400 has slightly more reach. So for both the widest and most zoomed in views, that is a win for the A6400, unlike the privacy of those poor unfortunate ducks. But which camera looks better? There is some subjectivity to this, which is why we've included so much test footage to help you form your view. Here, we've put both cameras on a gimbal, so stabilization is equal and we can therefore focus on image quality. I like using the Zhiyun Crane M2 for these lighter setups. More info on that gimbal in the description. In good light, I think both cameras look great with sharp and well-detailed images. Colors are pretty similar, as you'd hope when I'm using the same HLG picture profile. I like both and I would feel confident getting good results when color grading either. Beautiful blurry background bokeh actually looks very similar for both cameras. Remember that while the ZV1 has a wider aperture lens, the A6400 has a larger sensor, which is why overall the bokeh and depth of field is so similar for both cameras. And in a controlled setting, here's the ZV1, and here's the A6400. For me, this category is a tie. Let me know which one you prefer in the comments. That larger sensor in the A6400 also means a larger body. It definitely feels more solid, satisfying, and has a nice girth in the hand. Thankfully, none of those descriptions could possibly sound like a euphemism. But the A6400 is heavier at around 530 grams compared to around 300 grams for the ZV1, and the ZV1 will easily fit in a pocket, which is not true of the 6400. Both have flippy screens, but while the A6400 can tilt up and flip over, the ZV1 flips out and fully articulates, which is much more useful when shooting overhead or getting vertical shots. The 6400 also needs an accessory to move the hot shoe if you want to be able to use a mic while having the screen flipped over. The A6400 does have an interchangeable lens design, which is a big deal and which we will talk more about later, plus the build quality and materials definitely feel more premium and robust. But for usability and portability, the ZV1 wins this category for me. Both have great autofocus, and I don't think either will disappoint you in normal circumstances. Even my stress test, which has more silly jumping around than Mario after a lobotomy, struggled to trip up either camera. However, the ZV1 has eye tracking in addition to face tracking during video, compared to just face tracking for the A6400. Plus, while both struggle more with focus in low light, the ZV1 starts detecting faces at a significantly lower ISO, so the autofocus win goes to the ZV1 by a slim margin. Next up, a quick test of audio so you can hear how the built-in mics on these cameras sound. Here by the river right now, and you can probably hear we've got quite a bit of wind. Now hopefully the little dead cat that you get with the ZV1 right here is going to help with that. So now we're shooting on the A6400 using the Xeon Crane M2 gimbal. Okay, here we are on the Sony ZV1, standard steady shot on the Xeon Crane M2 gimbal. Now, do you want to get closer to your subject than that weird person on public transport who sits right next to you even though there's lots of empty seats elsewhere? Well, then you'll need to know about minimum focus distance. The ZV1 really impressed me with an ability to focus at about 4 centimeters compared to a minimum focus distance of 12 centimeters on the A6400. The ZV1 is therefore a better option for detailed product shots, super close-up details, and maybe even some macro footage. Plus, that closer focus distance increases the beautiful blurry background bokeh that you can achieve, as you'll see with the pretty lights here. A win for the ZV1, and a reminder that, contrary to my spam emails, fewer centimeters can be better, just like how slow motion is obviously better than normal motion. Both cameras can shoot 120 frames per second slow motion at 1080p. The quality looks great, and I don't see any major differences, so it's a tie, right? No. Partly because it's not that kind of tie, mainly because the ZV1 has an ace up its sleeve with ultra slow motion capabilities. The high frame rate mode of the ZV1 can only record for a couple of seconds, but it can shoot 240, 480 or even 960 frames per second slow motion, like the examples you're seeing here. There are some caveats like that short recording time, but it is a genuinely useful feature that can give you some stunning results. So the ZV1 takes the slow motion win, and there is more on ZV1 slow motion in the description. All of it is better than terrible fake slow motion where you impersonate the Matrix. Wow, it's probably not good for my back. Next up is low light, the only thing more cinematic than slow motion. This is where a camera with a larger sensor should shine, so the A6400 easily takes the win, right? Wrong. In a twist more shocking than when the villain in an episode of Scooby-Doo turns out to be just a guy in a costume, I actually prefer the ZV1 in low light. For one thing, the ZV1 is able to get face detect autofocus at lower ISOs. It's true the ISO range of the A6400 is much higher, and that for the same ISO you'll get less image noise on the A6400 than the ZV1, but I also find that the image on the A6400 gets softer, mushier, and less attractive faster. A wider aperture lens on the A6400 would probably give it the edge, but that's not our comparison for today. Out of the box, I think the ZV1 wins, and there's more low-light testing and tips in the description. There are two other small but nice extra features to point out on the ZV1. First is product showcase mode. Turn this on and then hold something near the camera. Autofocus will switch to the product you're holding and override face tracking. On the A6400, you'll need to cover your face. Not due to shame, like I usually do, but to make the focus switch to the product you're holding. The ZV1 also has a built-in ND filter, which is nice for allowing a wider aperture and lower shutter without overexposure when you're shooting in bright conditions. Nice, but not a game changer like expandability. This is where we think about how to expand your camera's capabilities to either make them do more or compensate some of their flaws. The ZV1 has good stabilization but a tight angle of view when you use it, then a wide angle lens or grip extension will fix that. Battery life isn't so hot? Don't worry, you can get some cheap spares or run from a USB power bank. There's a video in the description where I talk about a bunch of inexpensive accessories that can help expand the capability of the ZV1, but there is a limit. Will this ever be a telephoto camera with a much greater zoom range? No. Will it ever give you more bokeh or better low light results? No. The ZV1 is great straight out of the box, but you can't change its capabilities too much from that starting point. This is where the A6400 shines. Want better stabilization but not using a gimbal? There's a lens for that. Want a much bigger zoom range? There's a lens for that. Want a wider aperture for more bokeh or better low light? There's a lens for that. Want to be smarter, richer, and more attractive to the sexual partners of your choice? There's a lens for... Oh. Hold on. Hello? Oh, so you're telling me a lens won't help with that? Or the dysfunction thing. Restraining order. Okay. So you're saying lenses weren't the solution. Ah, crap. Looks like I need to go and fix a few things, but not before the conclusions. Straight out of the box and, for the price, I have to say the ZV1 is probably the better option. Better stabilization, cool extra slow motion features, and surprisingly decent low light performance, all while pocket-sized and with a more useful flip screen design. The A6400 is more customizable and future-proof thanks to lens selection, and with the right lens it really is a significant upgrade over the ZV1. But those extra lenses change our costs very quickly and make for a very different comparison. I find both useful, and the right one for you will depend on your use case. Let me know which one suits you best or any questions that you have in the comments. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching and especially for making it all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the video, then a like and subscribe would be amazing. And until next time, take it easy.